For many years, politicians have had to live with this idea that their private life is public. I think in the age of the television camera, politicians are on stage almost all the time, because there have been these famous incidents in the last 10 years when the recorders are switched on, but Bush or somebody else like that thinks they're switched off. They start to say what they really think, and it's all caught. Maybe it's just modern techniques are making it still easier to invade privacy than before, but it's a long tradition of invading privacy. And what interested me in the case of Louis XIV was that some of these things were already in place. On the propaganda side, there was already a committee to look at the image of the king in the different media of communication. They would look at these and decide, is that going to give the king a good image or not? Should we allow this to happen? But then on the other side, there's a whole underground of images of the king which the king didn't care for, but he couldn't stop them circulating. It was just that they circulated in private. All this was already in place in the 17th century. There's a good side and a bad side to I think any kind of change you can imagine. This is a commonplace in history. You don't have to make the children learn the dates of battles by heart, because if for some reason they really need to know the date of a battle, they click on Wikipedia and they find it almost instantly. But I would be very sorry if learning things by heart disappeared altogether, particularly with poetry. I can still recite poems that I learned, not because I was made to learn them, but I read them so often to myself that I ended up knowing them all by heart. Are they going to lose this art? There's no reason why they have to. Indeed, there's more time for it because they're not learning the dates anymore. So still a role for the very old-fashioned oral learning, but a smaller place for it now, thanks to these new means of communication. I don't think the new technology is good for long books. And the longer the book, the less comfortable it is, of course, to read it on Kindle or something. How are you going to read War and Peace? I mean, it's not only a strain on the eye, it's a strain on the arms. And I fear that maybe in future people might not write long books anymore. They would decide to write short books, so we have the downsizing of the book. Okay, I'm not against short books, but I would be very sorry if all books were short, if the children of today would be cut off from some long books of the past which are marvelous. I mean, Homer, Tolstoy, and people like this. People think my best book is Popular Culture in Early Modern Europe, which in some ways is nice, but I wrote this when I was 39, and I would like to think that I've got better since then, but nobody thinks, well, maybe because that was the right book at the right time on the right subject. I like to think now that I've been exploring some topics which the public, even other historians, have not caught up with yet. So I'm hoping that what I wrote about the history of language is going to be a subject of more interest in 10 years or 15 years' time than it is now. I'd like to think that this is because I'm a pioneer, but of course people can have very wrong opinions about themselves. I'm studying Gilberto Freire, and somebody with all these gifts, but he doesn't always assess rightly what his best work is and what his worst work is. So if he can't do it, I certainly can't do it. What I'm thinking about at the moment is the book I'm writing. It drives all the other topics into the background. And I thought I would write a second volume on the history of knowledge. So once I wrote from Gutenberg to Diderot, and now I found a good title from the Encyclopédie to Wikipedia. I started to think, how did we get where we are now from the age of Diderot? Well, the only way to find out is to do the research, because there's no book which tells this story. You know, sometimes you want to read a book and that book doesn't exist, so you end up writing the book that you hope that somebody else would write and you could read. But it's very exciting. I mean, it's dangerous for me because I never worked on the 19th, 20th centuries like this. When you've been working for 40 years on a period, you're afraid of going stale, you're afraid of repeating yourself. Well, if I don't have any new ideas, at least I'm going to write about a totally new century and hope that this will freshen me up.